Welcome, my friends. I am so grateful you chose to spend these few minutes with me. Let's just be present for a moment. Think back to a time when you washed your hands. Maybe this morning. Maybe just a few minutes ago. You turned on the water. You reached for the soap. You rubbed your hands together, rinsed, and dried them. It took maybe 20 seconds. You probably did not think about it at all. But what if I told you that simple act, those 20 quiet seconds, is the result of 5,000 years of human discovery, struggle, and science? What if I told you that the soap in your hand today carries inside it the stories of ancient fires, sacred temples, brilliant doctors, and ordinary people who changed the world without ever knowing it? This is not just a story about soap. This is a story about how human beings learn, how we discover things by accident, how we forget them, find them again, and slowly, across centuries, begin to understand what we have. Long, long ago, before cities, before books, before almost everything we know today, people lived close to fire. Fire was life. Fire gave warmth, light, and the ability to cook food. Every day, people built fires, sat beside them, cooked their meals, and watched the flames slowly die. And when the fire was gone, what was left? Ash. Gray, soft, quiet ash. For thousands of years, people did not think much about ash. It was just what remained after the fire. But one day, something happened. Something small. Something that nobody planned. Rain fell on the ash, and the ash mixed with animal fat from a nearby cooking fire. The water, the ash, and the fat came together in a soft, slippery paste. Maybe a child touched it first. Maybe a woman washing near the river noticed something strange. Her hands felt different, cleaner, smoother. The dirt came away more easily than before. Nobody understood why. Nobody had the words to explain it. But they remembered the feeling. And that feeling, that small and quiet discovery made near an ancient fire, was the very beginning of something that would one day save millions of lives. The story of soap had begun. And it started not in a laboratory, but in the earth, beside a flame, in the hands of someone who simply noticed something new. Many centuries passed. People continued to use ash and fat to clean themselves and their clothes, but nobody wrote it down. Then, around 4,000 years ago, in a land between two great rivers called the Tigris and the Euphrates, something important happened. This land was called Babylon, and the Babylonians were careful people. They wrote things down on small clay tablets, pressing symbols into the soft clay with a sharp stick. These tablets became a kind of book, a record of daily life. And on one of these ancient tablets, researchers found something extraordinary. A recipe. Not for food, but for soap. The recipe was simple. You take water, you take ash, you add fat from a cooking animal, you mix them together, you have soap. This is the oldest written recipe for soap that we know today. It is nearly 4,000 years old. But here is the interesting part of this early story. The Babylonians did not use this soap to wash their bodies. They used it to clean wool and fiber for making clothes. Soap, at this early time in history, was a tool for making cloth, not for cleaning people. This small detail tells us something important about how far the journey of soap still had to go. Because moving from cleaning wool to saving human lives was a very, very long journey. And it was only just beginning. Further along in our journey, we travel to ancient Egypt. Egypt was a land of great power and great mystery. The Egyptians built enormous stone pyramids that still stand today. They believed in many gods, and their priests performed sacred rituals every single day. And cleanliness was part of those rituals. Egyptian priests washed their bodies several times a day, not because they felt dirty, but because they believed cleanliness brought them closer to the gods. To be clean was to be pure. To be pure was to be good. This idea, the connection between cleanliness and goodness, was deeply important. Egyptian medical texts, written on long rolls of paper made from a river plant called papyrus, describe recipes for soap-like substances made with animal fat and plant ash. These substances were used to treat skin problems and to prepare the body for religious ceremonies. So in Egypt, soap was not just a cleaning tool. It carried meaning. It carried spiritual power. And this idea that washing the body is connected to something greater than dirt would travel forward through history and influence many cultures that came after. The Egyptians understood something that modern science would later confirm in a very different way: that what touches our skin matters. That what we remove from our bodies matters. They did not have the science, but they had the wisdom. And sometimes, wisdom arrives long before the science that explains it. Now our journey moves to Rome. Ancient Rome was one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. The Romans loved baths. They built enormous public bathhouses all across their empire, from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south. These bathhouses were not just places to wash. They were places to meet friends, discuss business, and spend the afternoon. Romans went to the baths every day. But here is something surprising. For a long time, Romans did not use soap to clean their bodies. Instead, they used oil. They would pour olive oil all over their skin and then use a small curved metal tool called a strigil to scrape the oil and the dirt away. It sounds strange, but it worked well enough for them. The Romans did know about soap. They made and sold it, but they used it mostly for washing clothes and hair, not for bathing. And then there is an old Roman legend, a story that people told for hundreds of years. On a hill called Sapo Hill near Rome, animals were sacrificed to the gods. The rain washed the fat from those animals down the hill, where it mixed with the ash from the sacred fires below. The women who washed clothes in the river below Sapo Hill noticed that their clothes came clean more easily in certain places. They did not know why. But the word sapo, which meant soap in Latin, may have come from this very hill. Whether the story is true or not, it is beautiful. It reminds us that discovery often hides inside the ordinary moments of daily life. After Rome fell, something strange happened to the story of soap. It nearly disappeared. The great Roman bathhouses slowly emptied. The roads fell apart. Trade between cities became dangerous and difficult. Knowledge that had been shared freely across the empire began to stay in small, isolated places. This long period in European history from roughly the 5th century to the 15th century, is sometimes called the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, and for soap and cleanliness, it was truly dark. Many people in Europe during this time believed that washing the body was dangerous. Some thought that opening the pores of the skin invited disease inside. Some believed that the layer of dirt on the body was a kind of protection. Some religious teachers suggested that bathing too much was a sign of vanity, of thinking too much about your body rather than your soul. Kings and queens, the most powerful people in the world, sometimes went months or even years without bathing. The smell of people, of streets, of cities, was something that we today would find almost impossible to imagine. And in the background of all this, disease moved freely. Plagues swept across Europe, killing millions of people. The connection between dirt and illness was not yet understood. Nobody yet knew about the invisible world of bacteria and viruses. The journey of soap had stalled. It had gone quiet, but it had not ended. Far away, in a different part of the world, the story was still moving forward. While Europe struggled in darkness, the Arab world was alive with learning. In cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus, scholars studied medicine, mathematics, chemistry, and philosophy. They translated ancient Greek and Egyptian texts. They built hospitals and libraries. And they made soap. Real soap. Beautiful soap. Arab soap makers in this period were true artists. They discovered that certain plant oils, like olive oil and laurel oil, made soap far gentler and more pleasant than the animal fat soaps of earlier times. They added fragrances. They added color. They created solid bars of soap that looked, smelled, and worked in ways that feel surprisingly modern. The city of Aleppo, in what is now Syria, became famous across the world for its soap. Aleppo soap, made with laurel oil, was hard, fragrant, and very gentle on the skin. It was exported to Europe, to Asia, to Africa. People who received it as a gift understood it was something special. Arab physicians also wrote clearly about the medical importance of cleanliness. The great doctor and philosopher Avicenna wrote detailed instructions about hygiene in his famous medical text, The Canon of Medicine. He explained that washing the body regularly was connected to health. He understood something that Europe was not yet ready to hear. And slowly, through trade, through the journeys of merchants and crusaders, these ideas and these beautiful bars of soap began to find their way back into Europe. The quiet knowledge was starting to travel again. As the Middle Ages slowly ended and a new period called the Renaissance began, Europe started to wake up. Cities grew larger, trade expanded, ships carried goods from one end of the world to the other, and soap began to travel with those goods. Two cities became especially important in the European soap story. The first was Marseille in the south of France. Marseille had access to olive oil from across the Mediterranean Sea, and it had skilled craftspeople who knew how to work with it. The soap made in Marseille, known as Savon de Marseille, became famous for its quality and purity. Laws were even written to protect its recipe. The second city was Venice in Italy. Venice was one of the great trading cities of the world. Venetian soap makers learned from Arab traders, from their own experiments, and from the growing scientific curiosity of the Renaissance period. They too produced high-quality soaps that spread across Europe. Slowly, Attitudes towards bathing and cleanliness began to shift. Wealthy people started to see soap as a luxury, a sign of refinement and good taste. Soap began to appear in the homes of kings, merchants, and educated citizens. It was still expensive. It was still not common. Most ordinary people could not afford it easily. But the direction had changed. Europe was beginning to understand, quietly and slowly, that cleanliness was not the enemy of health. It was the beginning of it. And the greatest discovery, the one that would change everything, was still to come. The 18th and 19th centuries changed the world faster than any time before. Factories rose above the flat fields of England. Steam engines pulled trains across new iron roads. Scientists filled laboratories with experiments and questions. And in this world of fast change, two things happened that would change soap forever. The first was a scientific discovery. In 1791, a French chemist named Nicolas Leblanc found a way to make soda ash, a key ingredient in soap, cheaply and in very large amounts. Before this, soda ash was rare and expensive. After this, it became common and affordable. Then, in 1823, another French chemist, Michel Eugène Chevreul, explained exactly what soap was and how it worked at a chemical level. He showed that soap was made when fats and oils reacted with an alkaline substance. This was not just interesting science. This was a recipe that any factory could follow. The second thing that happened was the rise of great soap companies. In England, William Lever built a soap factory and then built an entire village for his workers around it. He called it Port Sunlight. He understood something that very few businessmen of his time understood. If you make soap cheap enough for ordinary people to buy, and if you persuade them that cleanliness is good and important, you can change the world. And change the world he did. By the end of the 19th century, soap was no longer a luxury for the rich. It was becoming something that almost anyone could own. And this small change, a bar of soap in an ordinary hand, would soon save more lives than any army or any doctor could have imagined. Here we arrive at one of the most important moments in the entire story. A moment that is quiet and scientific, but changed the world more deeply than any battle. In the middle of the 19th century, a Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis worked in a hospital in Vienna. He noticed something that troubled him deeply. In one section of his hospital, many mothers died after giving birth. In another section, almost none died. The only difference he could find was this: the doctors in the dangerous section moved directly from cutting open dead bodies in the morning to helping women give birth in the afternoon, without washing their hands. Semmelweis began to ask his colleagues to wash their hands with a chlorine solution before touching patients. The death rate fell dramatically. He had discovered, before the full science of bacteria was understood, that invisible substances on the hands could carry disease and death. Tragically, many of his colleagues rejected his ideas. He was mocked, dismissed, and eventually died in a mental institution, possibly from the very infections he had spent his life fighting. But his observation was correct, and when Louis Pasteur in France and Robert Koch in Germany later proved the germ theory of disease, everything changed. The world now understood that tiny living organisms, bacteria, caused illness, and soap, real soap, could wash them away. The story of soap had found its deepest purpose. It was no longer about ritual, luxury, or smell. It was about life and death. As the 20th century began, governments and health organizations around the world started to understand something powerful. If people washed their hands regularly with soap, millions of lives could be saved every year. Diseases that had killed people for centuries, cholera, typhoid fever, dysentery, could be dramatically reduced simply by washing hands before eating and after using the toilet. During the First and Second World Wars, soldiers were taught to wash their hands and keep their bodies clean. Military doctors understood that more soldiers had historically died from infection and disease than from bullets and bombs. Clean hands saved armies. After the wars, public health campaigns spread this message to ordinary people. Schools taught children to wash their hands. Hospitals required strict hygiene from all their staff. Soap became part of daily life in a new and serious way. And soap companies, now large and powerful, worked hard to spread this message too. They understood that a cleaner world was also a world that bought more soap. And so, slowly, across decades, the habit of washing with soap spread deeper and deeper into daily life. By the end of the 20th century, hand washing with soap was understood as one of the most effective public health tools ever discovered. Simple, cheap, available almost everywhere, able to prevent more disease than almost any medicine. The ancient discovery made beside a fire thousands of years before had become a cornerstone of modern human health. And now we come to the end of our journey. 5,000 years. From the ash beside an ancient fire to the clean bar of soap beside your sink this morning. What a journey it has been. And what can we take from it? What does the story of soap teach us? It teaches us that great discoveries often begin small and quiet. They begin with someone noticing something. A woman washing clothes in a river and feeling her hands come clean in a special spot. A doctor watching numbers in a hospital and asking why. A chemist in a laboratory finding a cheaper way to make a common ingredient. Nobody planned the invention of soap. Nobody woke up one morning and said, "I will change the world today." It happened slowly, across generations, across cultures, across thousands of miles and thousands of years. And it teaches us something else, too. It teaches us that knowledge travels, that ideas move between people, between countries, between centuries. The Arab soap makers of Damascus shared their craft with European merchants. The science of Pasteur and Koch confirmed what Semmelweis had already seen with his eyes. Every discovery built on something that came before it. If you are listening to this story, you are part of that same long journey. You are learning English, and that learning is your own journey of discovery. Every word you hear today was not heard yesterday. Every story you understand brings you one step further along your path. This is how all learning works. One small discovery at a time. One quiet moment of understanding. One story listened to with care. Thank you for joining us here at Storyline English. If this story touched something in you, if it made you curious or thoughtful, or simply glad to have listened, then please leave a comment below. Tell us what surprised you most. Tell us what you want to learn next. And when you are ready for your next story, your next journey, we will be here, waiting for you, with another world to discover together.